welcome to the February monthly meeting for Camcycle. This is our first monthly meeting of the year, and we're kicking off in excellent style with our guest speaker, Sarah Berry. Before I go further into introducing Sarah, I'll just remind everybody that we did have our AGM just a few weeks ago, and we had a wonderful guest speaker, Melissa Bruntlet. And if you missed out, you can still catch up by looking on our YouTube channel or going onto our blog. That's a very long blog link, but if you just go onto our website, there's a big button about the AGM, and you can click on that and you'll find the details. But if you did miss out, don't worry, you can still catch up on YouTube. That includes our guest speaker as well as the official AGM business for Camcycle. And that official AGM business included the election of our 2021 trustees. So I would like to introduce our new board of trustees. Robin Hayden has been re-elected as the chair of the board, and we have a new treasurer, Peter Gotham. So welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining us. And I can tell everybody that Peter is already deep into helping with our finances, so that is fabulous. Re-elected also is Matthew Danish, Alex Seaman, Martin Lucas Smith, Finlay Knops McKim, Alessandra Caggiano, Tom McEwen, Sue Edwards, and we have another new trustee, which is Christopher Loughlin. So welcome, Chris, to the board as well. I hope you're joining us tonight, but if not, we'll I'm sure you'll get to meet everybody somehow, sometime, either online or in person, hopefully before the end of the year. And I'd just like to take this moment to say another thank you to Willa Mcdonald, who was our secretary or our vice chair, who has left the board this year. But thank you, Willa, for everything that you've done, and thank you for everything that you are currently doing in the NHS. We appreciate you and we miss you, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. And also a huge thank you to Chris Hull, who is our outgoing treasurer. Chris, I'm definitely going to miss working with you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for all your help with a lot of work on our finances over the last few years. And also thank you for sticking around to do a good handover as well. So thank you to Willa and Chris. Hopefully we still see you around, and welcome to Peter and Chris for joining the board. You can find out more about our trustees, our new trustees, on the Camcycle website. And also just to let everybody know that at the AGM, we also launched our latest annual review for all about the year that was 2020. And you can go online and have a look at that. It's camcycle.org.uk/annual reports. And there's also links to more details about the finances and so on from there as well. 2020 was not the year we thought it was going to be, but we still did a great job, and we're so proud of what we've achieved and also how wonderfully we've put that together in our latest annual review. So please do take a look, and when it's possible, we'll have print copies out there as well. That's enough of the quick updates from Camcycle. We'll go into more campaigning news after our guest speaker, but now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Sarah Berry. And I promise you, she really is amazing, and I'm not just saying that because she is a fellow Australian. So Sarah really did just pop onto the radar only a year ago with some just, to be honest, remarkable tweets. That was what I first heard about Sarah, just these tweets that were just absolutely hitting the nail on the head. And we got to learn more about Sarah, and it turns out that just a year ago, Sarah didn't even own a bike. So what we're here to learn about this evening is how did Sarah go from not cycling, not owning a bike, to becoming a cyclist, becoming an amazing advocate for cycling, and I think just someone who is shaking things up. But I'm not going to say any more because Sarah's going to tell us all about her journey. And I now pass this over to you, Sarah. I'll just shut off my screen share.
Brilliant. And I will start mine. Great. Can we see that and hear that okay?
Let's have a look. Facebook is a little bit behind, but yep, it looks to me like everything is working. So the floor is yours, Sarah.
Fantastic, thank you. Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me. I am a big fan of Camcycle and all the work that you guys do, so it's a real privilege for me to be here. I'm going to be talking about the difference an LTN makes, essentially, a low traffic neighbourhood, and my sort of journey from being a new cyclist to what I am now, which is a pretty busy active travel campaigner. So this is me. I don't know how old I am in this picture. We were debating how old I look, and we settled on around 4 just before this started. And this was me getting my first ever bike. As you can see, I'm a big fan of color coordinating my outfits to match my bike. Remember that, because it will come up again later. And at this particular point in time, you can see it in my face, right? I can imagine my cycling future ahead of me, all of the fantastic things that I'm going to do, and the brilliant journey that I'm going to have on my bike. But unfortunately, it was kind of a short-lived experience for me. Before I'd even really learnt how to ride a bike without training wheels, which was all the rage then. I'm told it's not all the rage now. I had a bit of an accident where my brakes failed when I was going down a hill, and I ran up the back of my best friend and cut up all of her back with my bike. And that was the end of our friendship and the end of my cycling career. 15 years later, I found myself in Cambodia and offered the opportunity to go on a cycle tour of the city. And I thought, you know what, I haven't ridden a bike in a very, very long time, but there's that phrase, it's like learning a bike. So obviously I will still know how to do it. After crashing into 3 parked cars before I'd even left the hotel complex, I realized that idiom was not based on truth, and decided to have a cocktail in the pool instead, and sort of gave up on my cycling dream, which was kind of fine when I lived in Sydney, when anywhere I could ever want to go was within walking distance. But less fine once I moved to London, and I all of a sudden sort of found myself living in a city where I would get the tube to work every morning, and I would arrive sort of grumpy, stained with the sweat of a stranger that I had been pressed up against for the hour-long journey from home. And then I would see my colleagues who had arrived by bike and look at them take their helmet off and toss their hair and be excited about life and have been exercised already and all of this sort of stuff. And I was just sort of God damn it, I want to be this person. So I went and did one of TfL's cycle training courses, those cycle confident courses that they offer for free for everyone. And I did the basic level 1, this is how to stay upright on a bike. And I was so proud of myself, and I was really excited to get cycling. But at the time I lived in Kensington, just off Kensington High Street. And I think even if you're not super familiar with London, you'll probably have heard about Kensington High Street. It's the place that just introduced a cycle lane, and despite seeing a massive increase in the number of cyclists, took it down because it was not increasing business to local stores there, even though it was during a pandemic and we were in lockdown and we were being told not to go shopping. But anyway, I very quickly realized that even though I could now ride a bike, cycling in London still felt too dangerous to me. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit now that I was definitely one of those people who was annoyed at cyclists because I was jealous of cyclists, right? I would see all these people moving around and having this wonderful time, and I felt like it was really unfair that they had the competence and the skill to do it and I didn't. And that sort of annoyed me. I looked back on a tweet I did at the start of last year that was this is going to be the year that either I learn how to ride a bike or everyone else stops. This has got to be the year that something makes a difference. And very luckily for me, there was a difference. The pandemic came, and in part of that response, my local council introduced the Railton low traffic neighbourhood. If you're not familiar with low traffic neighbourhoods, they're basically systems that control where cars can and can't drive. So every house within a low traffic neighbourhood is still accessible by car, but maybe not by the routes that they had been previously. It's designed to sort of stop rat running and stop people from sort of using what should be quiet residential roads to shave a minute or 90 seconds off their journey. So all of a sudden my street went from being incredibly busy and traffic filled, and my area went from being traffic filled to being incredibly quiet. And I decided, if not now, then when? So the day that I got my letter, I went out and I bought my bike. You'll see here that I've once again matched my outfit to my bike, which I think is quite an achievement, because when I left my house that day, I did not know what bike I was going to buy. So the fact that I managed to do that was quite an achievement. So at first I remember getting like really excited. This was June last year, to put this in context. And I remember being really excited about the first time I went for a ride with my boyfriend, even though we rode maybe like 3 minutes to the local shop. And then I remember getting really excited about when I rode to the local shop on my own for the first time, like my first time ever in my entire life going for a bike ride solo, and feeling confident enough not to fall off. And I basically fell completely in love with using my bike to get around, and particularly during the pandemic. I'm like one of those people that discovered cycling during the pandemic and found that as soon as public transportation wasn't available to me, a bike opened up a whole new world and a whole new sort of places that I could go, including, you know, the biggest ride I've done still is 10 miles there and back to visit my partner's sister and visit our new baby nephew who was born during the first lockdown. So I'm so grateful for the fact that that was something that I've been able to do. And this video, if it loads, sort of gives you, I think, encapsulates the joy that a lot of people here, I think, will recognize of like what it is like to cycle around in the streets in the summertime. I'm lucky to have a partner who's still, you know, astounded that I've learned how to ride a bike, and that's something that I do. So he tends to take videos and take pictures every time we are out on a bike. I just love it, and one of the reasons, because of the fact that I love it, is one of the reasons why I started writing a blog about it, Diary of a New Cyclist. One of the things I found very quickly when I started cycling is that it didn't take very long for me to forget what it was like to not feel comfortable cycling in London and cycling in a city, how it felt for me how quickly I forgot that sort of fear and that sort of impenetrability that cycling had before I started doing it. And I found that there were a lot of people who were speaking to cyclists, who were speaking to people who were confident from going from A to B, or who were speaking to people who'd never cycled before to get them on the bike. But there was no one who was really speaking to people in the middle who had, you know, just started riding a bike but were scared of going too far, scared of going to unfamiliar places, you know, couldn't signal yet, all of those sorts of things. So I decided to sort of write about my experiences. And that's been, you know, really exciting as well. And I think one of the things about writing about experiences that you have is that it causes you to sort of look at those experiences with a curiosity and a sort of why do I feel like this, or why do I experience things like this that you don't necessarily do if you're just going about and living your life. So, you know, I've thought a lot about, for instance, the familiarity that cycling sometimes has when I have altercations with drivers, when people are mad at me for taking up space or for doing something they don't expect me to do, and how familiar that feels to me as a woman, and how in my life I've had so many, you know, men who are telling me where they think I should be or how I should be behaving or how much space I can take up, and how I never thought, you know, my experiences of being a woman in this world would prepare me to be a cyclist. But you know, when it came to the first driver sort of honking behind me and wanting me to hug the curb, of being like having the same sort of indignation that I feel when a man speaks over me in a work meeting, of just like, no, I belong here, and I'm gonna stay here, and I'm gonna hold my space, and that being a really interesting thing to sort of discover as it went along as well. And I think that sort of noticing of those experiences, and the benefits that the LTN had for me in my life led for me to be really enthusiastic about making sure that people had the space and the opportunity to share the positive experiences that they were having living in our LTN. And one of the first sort of bits of campaigning that I did was to design these little posters that we sent around in local WhatsApp groups that people could sort of download and print out and put in their windows, to show the fact that they liked their LTN and they were enjoying it. This was during the first sort of summer lockdown when parents were desperate for anything for their young kids to do. So we had this sort of like colouring in sort of challenge, and that led us to thinking about other ways that signage and communication of these schemes was sort of working and not working. And I think that this was the moment that sort of catapulted me into the active travel campaigning community. I had a conversation with a couple of other folk in my local area. Some of you will know Simon Still from the London cycling campaign, and another local man named Rob Johnston. And we talked about the fact that the road closed signs that were everywhere were really sending the wrong message about the low traffic neighbourhoods. And for us, it really encapsulated the idea that it wasn't closed to cars, but it was open to everybody else. And even if you were a driver, even if you never traveled by bike or never traveled by walking, you would still take your dog for a walk. Sometimes you would still go for a run on the street. There would still be times when those changes were for you, and we wanted to make sure that those people were spoken to. So we made these signs and put them up on Google Drive and said that they were available to anyone, and a few local people went in the dead of night and attached them to planters and different signs. Last I heard, they were in, I think, 40 different cities and towns around the country, including in Scotland and Wales. I just got a message before I joined saying that there's also been one that's designed for Ireland as well, that's translated into Irish, which is really exciting. For those of you who are active on Twitter, very active on Twitter, you might have seen a few minutes before this session kicked off, that I've been contacted by a few councils saying that they've been advised to take these down, and it does look like the sort of time for these signs is done. But I did a thread about this just before we started, and I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail on that. But essentially, when we designed this sign, the idea that people would feel an ownership over their roads that weren't drivers was sort of unimaginable. It felt so far away from where we were at the time. And when I think of where we are now, when I think of the number of sort of groups that have emerged over across the country of people who are fighting for changes, the number of LTNs that have gone in, the number of street changes that we're seeing, and the sort of priorities of the government, I think that we're living in a really different world. And I'm kind of hoping that these signs have sort of served their purpose, in the sense that there are a lot more people now, I think, than there were a year ago, myself included, who look at a road and say, that's mine, even if I don't use a car. And I obviously hope that we'll get more and more of those folk, regardless of what happens to these signs. But I think, they've been a really positive and enjoyable part of my sort of campaigning in this area. And I'm, grateful for all of the people I've met and all of the things that have happened because of them. There are a few other things that we've done. I think, as Rox said, most people first hear about me and Lambeth living streets through Twitter, you're most likely to have seen the stuff that we've done online rather than the stuff that's happened offline. And I want to sort of focus on the things that the campaign groups that we're involved in have done in our local area to really transform it. So this is one of them. This is the stock standard Railton LTN planter, but you'll see that there's been a bench that's been added onto this. One of the members of our group is incredibly handy, and so he adapts all of the local planters. He'll go and talk to local businesses. There was a butcher who said, I love my local planter, I just wish that there was somewhere where I could sit and have my coffee. So he built a little bench to go along with it, and also a little coffee holder, cup rest for him to have there. We've also got spaces for people to play dominoes. We've got a really big dominoes playing community around here, so making sure that there's that sort of space. Most recently, this expanded to a parklet that's got spaces for more elderly people and others to sort of take a break when they're walking as a form of travel rather than in a car. You'll see here one gentleman doing just that. It's also got a hidden marble run and a small seat for a toddler-sized person to be able to rest. And it's unfinished. It still needs to be planted in, but already you see people that are making the most of it. There's been a community notice board that's been added, and this sort of thing is already changing the sort of streets there. You'll see here, this is this little boy's first time ever riding his bike on the road. And you can see the sort of joy in his face, I think, of that experience of getting that freedom. This was the morning after a group came and painted the road with this design to sort of, again, simulate this space is not just for cars anymore, it's for a bunch of other people. We'd spoken to the council and sort of said, you know, hypothetically, if we were to paint the road, where would be a good place to paint the road? And someone in the council was like, well, hypothetically, it might be here. And we were worried that some people would be opposed to it, but actually what happened is it was asked to have these introduced in other LTNs around the area, and even in a local primary school that painted the asphalt in their playground to match the design in the LTN, to feel like there was, you know, this is the spot where children play, and to continue that sense, that feeling on, so that it was something that was expanded out more broadly. I'm sure something like this exists in Camcycle as well, but we worked on the Lambeth Bike Buddies scheme, so the Lambeth cycling campaign. Worked with them on the design of this poster of partnering up new cyclists with experienced cyclists, so people can get more comfortable on those sort of big journeys. And this group has been so fundamental and so helpful. I had a bad cycling day one day, you know, late last year, where I just found myself having a few too many close calls with drivers, and then found it quite hard to get back on the bike. And it was sort of the Lambeth Bike Buddy scheme that came out and said, you know, we'll take you, and sort of overwhelmed with offers of people willing to get back on the bike and do that together. The other thing I want to talk about is, you know, the actual impact that the LTN itself has had. The first sort of round of traffic counts found that traffic was down by almost 2/3 inside of the Railton low traffic neighbourhood, the one that was right by my house. That saw an increase in cycling in some of the streets in that LTN by 50% on Railton Road itself, and by 75% on Shakespeare Road, which is another one of the roads within the LTN. And traffic was also down on all of the boundary roads that surrounded the LTN, except for one where it had gone up by 6%. So I think one of these things here is, you know, these sort of massive changes. When I talk about the fact that, you know, I didn't feel safe cycling in London, and then an LTN came in and I did, you know, it wasn't just me. There was a huge number of people that started picking this up and started cycling, and it was because of the fact that this sort of traffic had gone down, and it really was sort of having that impact on the area. There are a few other things that we've been involved in that have been really exciting, including at the moment, we're organising a low traffic neighbourhood run, which is a 10-kilometre running route that covers all of the LTNs within Lambeth. I think we've got 7 at the moment. So giving people the opportunity to sort of, for runners to claim that space, as well as pedestrians and cyclists, and to make sure that they know that they're there. And it's just been a really sort of delightful time. I think if you came to me a year ago and said, 1 year from now you're going to be speaking at a cycling group monthly meeting, I would have laughed at you in your face. The idea of, like, I just honestly thought that I would never be the kind of person who would be able to ride a bike. I thought, like, you know, I was too nervous, I was too risk averse, I was too fat, I was too all of these things to ever be able to do it. And I've seen the sort of power that changes like these sort of alterations to streets to sort of shift the balance of power a little bit away from cars and a little bit more towards everyone else can make in a life. And because of that, I've sort of made it my mission to campaign as hard as I can to get that, you know, in as many places around the country as possible, and make sure as many other people have that experience as well. And it's been a real delight. So it's something that will continue. I'm not sure how much longer I'll keep writing the blog for. One of the things that I'm struggling with at the moment is, like, how long can you call yourself a new cyclist for? And, you know, I still don't know how to signal, so I think I can still call myself a new cyclist until I can at least figure out how to ride a bike without having both hands clenched on the handlebars at the same time. But as I said, I have a bike cup holder now, so, like, you know, that's got to add some cycling points to my sort of tally board. But for the moment now, at least, every time I get on my bike, I'm having an experience that is entirely new and that feels worthy of speaking about. So that's that. For as long as that is the case, I think I'm gonna keep going with it. But the active travel campaigning itself is something that I hope will continue for the rest of my life or until it's no longer required. And if ever there's anyone who has ideas for collaborations or different projects that we can work on, I'm always up for hearing about those things. But yeah, that's sort of it from me for the presenting part.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was excellent, and we'll just let Facebook and various things catch up with us, and then we will get some questions through, I am sure. But while we wait for that, that means I get the privilege of asking the first question, but I had so many, so I've got to pick which one I'm going to ask, and it's escaped me. It was about the sign that you made. It's completely gone. I'm so sorry. I guess I liked you were saying, how long can you be a new cyclist for? And it made me think back to, well, how long was I a new cyclist for? And just like you, it was quite a surprise for me to find myself on a bike. I mean, this was not what I was expecting for my life, but it took someone really supportive to help me get going. And yeah, I would say it was about a year. I went from a rust bucket 3-speed that broke straight away to, racing along after my friends, and within a year cycled 210 kilometers in one day. So I guess that qualifies as maybe not being a new cyclist, but I still today feel like there's things to learn, and I still don't know how to fix my bike properly, or there's always more to do. So when are you a perfectly formed, complete cyclist? Maybe never. So I guess the long story short, I think you can keep writing your blog for years.
Great. I will.
Maybe it needs to be a diary for a slightly less new cyclist.
Yeah, just drop the new and just sort of keep it going.
Well, I can see we have a comment from Wookie, who said that he's been cycling for 40 years and has never cycled 210 kilometers. Wookie, I'll just say that
kilometers too.
I did the Melbourne around the bay in a day, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I did not have a proper road bike. My team that I was meant to be doing with it ditched me in the first 15 kilometers. So I did it all on my own. And I had a grand time because I talked to all these people along the way who just couldn't believe what I was doing on that bike. I don't think I'd even cycled 80 kilometers before I did that.
That's so impressive.
I think that definitely means I was still a new cyclist because I really didn't know what I was doing. So I'm waiting for some questions to coming through. So Stuart has come back and said, keep going, but just call yourself the experienced new cyclist.
I like that. That's a really good idea.
And experience could mean many things, doesn't mean all the experiences. And John has also come back and said that he loves your comment that I never thought I would be a new cyclist, and how can we best encourage more people to follow in Sarah's wheels? What do you think? While it's still in your memory, what it took for you to start cycling, what do you think we can all do to help create the right conditions for other people?
It's a great question. I think that there are a few things. Some of those are infrastructure based, like I said, like it took pretty major street changes to get me to feel like I was safe and comfortable, but also to make me feel like I had permission to be someone who was still learning, but taking up that space, right? Like the message that I was hearing from my local council and from the government generally is we want people to change how they get around London, to not be on public transport at this time when we can't have it too crowded, and to not be using their cars, but to be cycling and walking. And that to me was like, right, you can do this even if you're not good at it, right? This is the time to learn. And I think having that message is really important. The other thing, and I always feel a little bit guilty when I admit this, and I don't really know why, but it's seeing people who I think are like me, or even more risk averse or more anxious than me doing it. The things that really helped me was when I saw, friends of mine who would, when they found out that I was, traveling to Nairobi or to Beirut, would be like, oh my God, I could never do something like that. Then get on a bike and cycle away, and maybe like, but I could never do something like maybe I can do that thing. But also see, different types of people, like parents with their young kids, pregnant women, you know, young children, all of that sort of stuff. When I saw people with a really wide variety of skills represented as cycling, it sort of made it feel more possible to me. And I think like a big change that needs to happen, and one I think about a lot, is how we represent cycling in popular culture. If I think about women who I see riding bikes in movies that just come to my head straight away, I think of Anne Hathaway in One Day, and I think of Meg Ryan in City of Angels, both of whom are killed by getting struck by trucks when they're cycling. And like, for me growing up, there weren't other representations of women who rode their bikes, and it was just a thing that they did that wasn't that interesting. And like now, when I think about it, you see the new Tomb Raider, you see Discovery of Witches, you see a whole bunch of other things where there are these representations of adult women getting around on their bikes, and it's just a matter of fact thing that happens in the background. And I think that that's really important too. And the other one, and I think that there's a real place for more experienced cyclists, is to be vocal about the fact that you were a beginner once too, or that you struggle as well. I remember the first time I fell off my bike, I was cycling to a meeting in Farringdon, which is about 7 miles away from my house. And just as I went to sort of like merge into traffic, I lost balance and just like bike tipped over with me on it. And I was running late for this meeting. I was super stressed. I'd like cut my knee up. I was like bleeding everywhere and just had to like keep going. And I remember tweeting about it, being like, oh, I fell off my bike today. Like I knew it was going to happen, finally happened to me, like, haha, what an idiot kind of thing. And I was inundated by responses from these people who were like, in full lycra with the like cycling caps and like all of this sort of stuff, sharing their recent stories of times in the past, like 3 months that they'd fallen off their bikes. And it was completely unknown to me that someone who was experienced at riding a bike would ever fall off. And there are amazing stories of people who were like, chatting with their friends and cycling along and then ran into a pole and fell off, and like other people who had like clipped on and forgotten and then like tried to get off and fallen off their bikes, and like other people who just like me lost their balance and fallen off for no particular reason. And that made me feel like I think as a non-cyclist, when you look at the cycling community, it just looks like such a like perfect group of people, which like, yeah, exactly, especially you, Rox. Like now that I'm in that world, I know that that's not true, but from afar it's just like, these are fit, active, very, very capable, very, very strong, very assertive people who are capable of doing anything. And it's been really helpful for me to sort of come into this world and see that that's not always the case, that people struggle, that people have injuries that mean they have to cycle in different ways, or that they too, like even someone who's been cycling for 40 years might take a different route or get off and wheel their bike sometimes because they don't feel safe. So I think that's a very long-winded way of saying vulnerability from experienced cyclists can go a long way to help newbies like myself feel like they could be part of that community one day too.
Yeah. Remind me to tell you about the time I fell off my bike after a all-party parliamentary cycling group event on Brian Deegan's brand new segregated cycleway, and spilled blood all over it. So I christened Brian Deegan's new cycleway, cycling at a very slow pace in my lovely big skirt. It just one of those freak things that happened, but could you imagine if I'd done that in front of all the MPs and ambassadors and so on?
I had a conversation with Helen Hayes, who's my local MP. She, this is, if it can be like not advertised super widely and kept between the people in this call, recognizing that it's going on the internet. But
it's going on the internet.
Going on the internet. We met to have a sort of tour around the LTN at one stage, and she told me about it was just earlier that I'd fallen off, and I was telling her about it, and she told me about a time that she was cycling up the hill in Crystal Palace, which is like the hill that you saw me going down in that video. It's where like the proper cyclists train, right? It's like a brutal hill. And she said I was just going so slowly that I just toppled off. Like I just like fell off on the side, and I was just like, she was like, and then I went out and bought an electric bike. I was like, this is enough. And I just love that idea of just like going so slowly that you just like slowly tilt over, and that could happen to an MP. Again, I felt like I was like, it's fine. I'm doing great.
But how great that we have so many MPs who are cycling, including our local MP in Cambridge. Right, I must make sure we get some other questions here. So, oh, great questions that I have here from Wookie. So firstly, he's asked, where do you find places to talk to potential new cyclists? But following up to that, and how do those of us who've completely forgotten what it's like to be a newbie talk to those people, or should we not try, as we'll just be alienating?
Great question. I find them on Twitter, and I tend to find that people will reach out, like, and it obviously helps that I'm very vocal about the fact that that's, you know, who I am and what my experience is. But I think that there'll be more folk than you recognize. I think setting up schemes like the bike buddies, where you invite people who are new to come out and do that, can be a really great way of finding those folk. But the other thing is to look for public figures who talk about this. So for instance, Emma Barnett from Women's Hour just posted recently about the fact that she's been a new cyclist. And if you look in the replies to that, you know, there's so many people who are coming out and saying that they're having a similar sort of experience. So those people are there. And I think that it's fine. And I think, again, like, as I was saying, the best way to talk to them is to just make the experiences seem normal and commonplace, even if perhaps that they aren't. Like, I think that there is, for some reason, and I think it's because of the fact that the representation in the past has been so narrow, there's this real sense that you have to be a certain kind of person to cycle. And I think if you can say, you know, oh, that happens to me too, or oh, I'm also like that, then it kind of makes people feel like the cycling, the them and the cycling Venn diagram has some overlap, and that can be all it takes to make it feel like you belong there as well.
Yep. I Wookie, to add to that, I find you can cross interests. So I do sewing, and I sew something and then I wear it on a bike ride and I cross post on Instagram. So I've got all these people who sew suddenly getting secret cycling campaigning messages. So you're finding those ways. Or even I have a really nice pannier bag, and when I take it to the shops, I always get the person at the supermarket saying, oh, that's a really nice bag. And I'm like, oh, it goes on my bike. And people can't believe that I cycle. Or you turn up somewhere in your nice outfit and people just can't believe you've cycled, and it starts to chip away at those messages. But Wookie, if you turned up in high heels, I think you'd scare people a little bit. So Jim Wookie said that stuff all works better as a woman. You know what? Actually, maybe I think anyone could give it a go. Jim has said, I think it's probably a comment, try a bikeability course in Cambridge. It's great to see year 6 children doing their courses on public streets. Skill for life. I agree. And we have lots of bikeability that happens in Cambridge normally to see that. Tom has said, the campaigning you've done is inspirational. Do you feel there are experiences or skills that you have that enabled you to take on that role so readily and effectively? And I would back that question up as well with, is this something that's come really natural, or is it coming from your career? The way you've communicated has just really cut through, I think, in a way that a lot of us who've been doing this for years just haven't quite managed to nail that voice. So where's it coming from, Sarah?
So I am a campaigner by profession. I think that's sort of important to say. But my day job is campaigning on war and conflict. So my specialty is Yemen, which is a very different sort of bag. But to be honest with you, I think it comes from my mum. So I had a stay-at-home mum when I was growing up, and then when I was 11, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she's fine, she's healthy, she's still alive, she's still with us, which is fantastic. She's also historically was like a raging Tory, and when she finished her treatment, decided that she wanted to repay the cost of her treatment to the taxpayer. So started volunteering with our local Cancer Council chapter in Australia to raise those funds, which was something like $70,000. To date, she's raised like 1.5 million Australian dollars for the Cancer Council. It started with her having 3 friends over for Australia's biggest morning tea for some cupcakes and coffee, and ended with her sponsoring the biggest sort of New Year's Eve party in my local town, where, you know, tens of thousands of people would go, and the proceeds would go to the Cancer Council. And I think just like growing up watching her and watching how she did things really instilled in me this idea that if something wasn't right and something wasn't working, then you just thought about creative ways that you could change that. And I think that that's been sort of a real thing that's instilled in me. I think one of the big things that I notice between people who campaign really well in this space and people who perhaps want it but don't campaign, or even people who are against it, is this sense of hope as to whether or not anything can actually change. And I think that I've been really lucky to grow up watching someone who has made a real difference and who has made a real contribution without much resources to start off with, just through like tenacity. So I've sort of been growing up shown that that's the norm. But I think the other thing is that, you know, I feel a big connection to, I can really empathize with people who are on the other side of this. And I hate that in a way, because I don't want to feel empathy with people who don't think cyclists deserve road space or don't think of any of that sort of stuff. But, you know, I think of my dad, who for the past 40 years has had a 2.5 hour commute each way to a job that he hates. And anything that would add 5 minutes to his journey would, like, when he's so close to just breaking down by how much he hates his life and what he has to do, 5 minutes added onto that journey is really difficult. So when I think about the campaigning work that I do, and I think about the messages and I think about communicating it, I think about how I would have that communication with my dad, someone who I love and someone who I know doesn't want bad conditions for someone like me, his daughter, but who, you know, is having a hard enough time that, like, any other straw on his back is too much to handle. And I think that by doing things like, by filling that space, there's just a little bit of a gap, because I think most people, very rightly so, don't want to have empathy with people who are putting their lives in danger or fighting against changes that will make them more safe. And I don't think people should have to be honest. But because, you know, it wasn't very long ago that I was one of those people who didn't understand the importance of it, that I think that being able to bridge that gap sort of makes a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to keep that empathy. And I guess for me, growing up in very car-centric Perth in Australia, and I used to have a little red sports car. You know, I can still remember those feelings. It's fading away after many years in Cambridge, but we have to keep those people in mind and what messages would have cut through. And also that those people aren't necessarily out to kill us. They're out to drive and maybe don't even realize what they're doing and don't realize what that safe space would actually mean for people cycling. So we have to, always keep that in mind. But the way you do it is very excellent, Sarah. Okay, we've got a great question from Anna. What links have you made with local groups? It sounds as if you have a lot of support within Railton. Is that through the Living Streets group or also a residents association, cycling groups? And I guess there's the groups you might expect for an LTN, but are there any sort of unexpected alliances or connections that you've been able to make to bring that support along?
Totally. 9 months ago, I didn't know anybody in this space, anybody at all. How I got started was I went to an information evening on the local LTN and then reached out to the person who hosted it and said, I have some social media experience. I'd be really happy to set up a social media account for Railton LTN if that would be helpful. And they said, no, thanks, that won't be helpful. Don't worry about it. And I said, I think you're wrong. I'm going to do it anyway. And did it anyway. And then sort of because they were seeing the sort of response that was getting, we started working together more. And as I would hear from people on social that were supportive of the LTN, I would sort of bring them into the group. And there's a core group of about 10 of us who have been, who were just random residents who really liked the idea of the LTN at the start, who have been sort of backing that up. And then people, I've been astounded at how welcoming and engaging this cycling community is. I've just had these experiences of, you know, having people reach out and say, you know, so great that you're doing this, so great that you're starting cycling. I work with this group. If you ever want to collaborate, let me know. And I've just tried to really take up those opportunities. I think one of the things I did, which I didn't realize at the time was going to end up with being so connected, was when there had been a sort of the one groups started forming, the sort of like one Railton and one Ealing and one whatever. And they were coming out sort of anonymously against low traffic neighbourhoods. I coordinated a sort of joint statement from groups who were willing to put their name to how much they supported low traffic neighbourhoods, and that's how I first met Camcycle. And I think we ended up with like 150 organizations from around the country signing on to that statement, and that meant that I got to meet 150 groups that I've had the sort of opportunity to work with. But my experience of this space has very much been that if you ask for help from anyone, they'll be very willing to give it to you, and they'll also be very willing to sort of connect you with other groups. The ones that I've been sort of most surprised to work with are the disability cycling groups. To be like, you know, again, showing my ignorance of this space, I wouldn't have known that cycling would be a mobility aid for so many people until I sort of joined this space and saw that. And I've had a very steep learning curve of how to be accessible in my language when I talk about car dependency and car dominance. And it's something I'm still making mistakes on every day and still trying to do better with every day, and still learning. Our local laundromat has been a real ally. They've built a massive, they've like loved the fact that the traffic has been less, and they've used as an excuse to fund and build a parklet on my old street that's just by their business. Now that it's not, you know, full of cars all the time, people stop, and they've always helped the community, but now they have sort of like cheese and wine nights that they host at the parklet, and they just sort of like message the street WhatsApp group and say cheese and wine at the parklet, and everyone like wanders down, obviously not right now, but in less locked down times. And also I think the sort of healthcare groups, I've been so impressed with, you know, in here in London, we've got NHS trusts that are funding LTNs, that are putting the money up for them because they know how important it is for their staff to have healthy and safe routes to work. And again, that's something that I wouldn't have thought of before. But my next sort of like the thing I've got my eye on next, as I said, is sort of like television, film producers, that sort of like, how do we get better representation for cyclists in popular culture? I know Adam Tranter from Bike is Best is, you know, thinking about, you know, how do we get it to be just like someone cycling around on their way to work in a sitcom or on a soap or on something else. Like, how do we do these things? And I think that's really important to help people, you know, envisage what that life could look like for them.
I really agree with you. We need that proper approach to marketing of product placement, don't we?
Yeah.
And relatable people, and not just necessarily in the media, but just more people coming out, like we're seeing lately on Twitter, just people you wouldn't necessarily expect saying, oh yeah, I'm riding a bike. That might, people can go, oh, hang on, I can relate to that person in a way I didn't think I would relate to a cyclist. We need to get more of those people stepping up, which ties into Edward's leading question, which is slightly tongue-in-cheek, his words. If Jeremy Vine and Chris Boardman are the kings of cycling campaigners in the national media, who are the queens? And Tim very, very kindly has said it's Roxanne and Anna. I'd add Sarah to that as well. But you know, who do you think, Sarah, could be our queens in the media?
That is such a fantastic question. And you should tweet it and tag me in it so I can retweet it. Or if you don't do that, I'm just going to tweet it out. So, you know, you've been warned. Who are the queens? I'm going to have like loads of people in my mind as soon as this finishes. I think that Wheels for Wellbeing remind me of Isabel from Wheels for Wellbeing is a fantastic sort of queen for cycling. I think that we have potential in, and I'm going to mispronounce her name, is it Ashsakar? The sort of like, she's the sort of, you know, media spokesperson who's just learning how to cycle, already had a massive platform and is now like, you know, wait, it's super, you know, stupid how hard it is to cycle around different places. You know, I want to see, like, you know, hopefully Emma Barnett becomes that, right? Like, again, she's already got an amazing platform. She'd be brilliant at this. But, you know, if I think about women and I think about cycling, I sort of think about Laura Laker and Rachel Aldred, the sort of academics and the journalists who are behind that. But, you know, I do think, like, you know, we need a woman cyclist with a column or a TV show or a radio show or something along those lines. Like, we need that sort of amazing representation. And you know, my vote would be for Rox if you want to step up and take that handle.
Not sure, but I did actually hear from Professor Rachel Aldred today. She gave a talk to Ideas with Beers about LTNs. So we now have officially our cycling professor. So she might not want the title of Queen if she is our professor, but I love that we have a cycling professor now. Excellent. So Kate Salter has asked, how do you bridge that gap? Now, Kate, I think I've lost track of where the bridge that gap came through, but does that come back to something you've said, Sarah, or we can ask Kate to give a little more context? But Kate has asked that as asking as someone living in an area where LTNs and ETROs they're threatened to be ripped out due to it being a political ball with our local council. So I guess perhaps not quite knowing what bridge that gap means, but for those areas where LTNs are at risk or have become so political, and Cambridge, I would say we have our own little location where that is definitely an issue. How do you think we can deal with that?
I think that, so the answer that I always give to this is that the best support that we can give to LTNs and the best way that we can promote them is to just go out and enjoy them. And you know, this might be a controversial thing to say to a cycling group, but for me, things like LTNs are important because they give us the ability to get somewhere safer or more enjoyably. They're important because they give people who live in these areas and who frequent these areas more ownership over it, and it's not just a space for cars. So I often think about the research that Donald Appleyard did, which, if you're not familiar, he basically found that if you're someone who lives on a quiet road, you're likely to have, on average, like 2 more friends than someone who lives on a busy one, which basically shows that when you take traffic out of an area, you increase the sociability and the community and the connectedness of that. So like, what we don't do enough is talk about low traffic neighborhoods and these sort of moves against car dominance as a means of tackling loneliness, which is a huge problem in the UK, especially for, you know, elderly people who don't have the ability to drive anymore and who, if they're on super congested streets, won't have the ability to walk up the road and chat to a neighbor or visit a shop or do things like that. So for me, I think if you're a community that loves their LTN and wants their LTN to stay, then get together with other local members of your community and don't talk about how you can myth bust the antis or prove what they're saying is wrong. Think about the street parties that you can host. The local group here in Tulse Hill for Christmas did a 12 Days of Christmas feature where they decorated each planter to fit with one of those lines in that 5 golden rings song. So they even made like a partridge in a pear tree out of paper mache and like put it in the planter, and kids were able to do a scavenger hunt. You know, it's one thing to rip out a traffic management program. It's another thing to rip out something that has catalyzed these huge community building activities that have seen, you know, organize a school sort of cycle bus or walking bus to school and all of these different things that wouldn't be possible if the LTN was there and had to leave if the LTN wasn't there. One of the big things we did in our area, we had a local resident who was friends with a lot of the people who were really opposed to the LTNs, and she didn't really have a position, but all of her friends hated them. And she was a cyclist, she didn't drive, but you know, she was a skeptic at the start. And the way that she became on board is that there was a greening group that was started that basically said, now that the streets are so much nicer to be on, shall we start planting more plants on our street and growing more things? And she was an avid gardener. And now when I'm out with her and a car drives past or speeds past, she'll literally yell at the driver, being like, this is not what these streets are for, like get really worked up about it. And she wasn't convinced by, you know, seeing that there was less traffic. She was convinced by seeing what less traffic could mean for her community. So making sure that we're taking up those opportunities as well, and really making the most of the space that we've got. Because as you do that, it means that you're just going to have more and more people that will join the fight if they try and take it away.
Yeah, excellent. And Kate's come back and provided a bit of context there, which is bridging the gap between car drivers and cyclists with reference to being empathetic. And I think you've broadly answered that. But then Kate's followed up with, how do you get the elderly and young children who are without a voice to be heard by councils? I think we saw a hint of that in your presentation with the colouring in and the posters and so on, but do you have any more advice on amplifying those other voices?
Yeah, I think that there's there's a real gap in consultation from the council in children's voices. I don't think children are taken into account enough when it comes to this sort of stuff. And the way that they best seem to be represented is when you look at the statistics of changes in how people are getting to school. So you'll see, you know, Will Norman is often talking about the changes that he's seen in the number of school kids around here in Dulwich and in Ealing, you know, a 22% increase in the number of kids that are cycling to school. Dulwich having to build, you know, 2 additional bike and scooter storage facilities because the number of kids that are getting to school that way has gone up so dramatically with the introduction of LTNs and school streets. That's one way to make sure that kids' voices are represented. When the LTN first went in here, we organised a colouring in competition for the local nursery where they got to design their own road signs that we put up around the neighbourhood. So now when you go through the area, it'll say, you know, please leave your car at home and enjoy our low traffic neighbourhood, designed by Ella, age 4. And, you know, Ella gets to go to nursery and see her sign up on the road, and that's nice for her, but it does, you know, introduce children's voices. You know, I think for elderly residents, it's a lot harder, especially because of the fact that, you know, there's, especially at the moment, that they're so often absent from our streets with threat of COVID and being so vulnerable to that. One of the things that we did when the LTNs first went in was we went to local sheltered accommodation that catered for elderly residents and asked what they thought and asked what their perspectives were. We also try to make sure that people with their permission that are elderly and, you know, using things like the parklet or riding electric scooters down the, like electric wheelchairs down the roads are documented and included in these discussions. But I think that, you know, there's a real sort of voice behind elderly people needing cars. And when I think about my grandparents, you know, the biggest loss to their independence was when they lost their ability to drive, and their streets weren't safe for them to get around on foot or to get around in their wheelchair or get around in any other way. And I think that's something that doesn't necessarily spring immediately to mind to people, but the ability to remain connected is very much linked to your ability to walk to the shops and get to those places safely. And again, it comes down to representation. Like, you know, I would like absolutely read a book or watch a movie about an elderly woman who loses her driver's license and decides to learn how to ride a bike instead, and use that to get around. Like, I would watch the shit out of that show, to be completely honest with you.
Write the screenplay.
Exactly, yeah. That's my challenge to you. Write a screenplay.
So we've had a tip. John is asking for a tip. What would be your number 1 tip to help encourage my 30-year-old daughter to consider cycling a 3-mile distance to work? It's 90% on cycle lanes. She doesn't want to get sweaty or mess up her hair. Should I buy her an e-bike for her birthday? Well, firstly, yes, buy the e-bike. You wouldn't love an e-bike as a gift. But do you have any other tips if the e-bike isn't forthcoming? I wish someone would buy me an e-bike.
I know, right? I think do it with her. Like, go and you know, get a Santander bike. Go and say that it can be slow and it can be those things. You know, for me, one of the things that cycling gives me that I didn't have before is agency. You know, there's nothing worse than that feeling of when you're sitting on the tube or on a train and it's not moving and you are watching the time tick by and you have no idea when you're gonna start moving again. And that sort of sense of dread that you have as someone who uses public transportation or as someone who drives, the fact that, like, you know, I'm never stuck in traffic anymore. That's never something that I have to deal with. The other thing for me, and it depends what your daughter's into, but for me as an almost 30-year-old, one of the big incentives is the fact that I can just like stop and have a coffee if I want to. And if I see like a nice looking coffee shop or a nice looking bar or a nice looking whatever, I can stop and enjoy it and then sort of go on my business. And just like knowing how long my journey is going to take, you know, like my city mapper or my Google Maps will tell me it's going to be 20 minutes by bus, but then it's an hour and a half. If it tells me it's going to be 20 minutes on bike, it's always 20 minutes on bike, no matter how hard I pedal. I never shave any time off that 20-minute mark. But I think those things as well, just like the sense of control that you can have over your own life, I don't think we talk about that enough either.
Yeah. And John, I'd be very happy to have a chat to her about top tips in terms of clothes and fabrics and so on. I mean, broadly, I say you can ride a bike in anything, but I think you start to learn a couple of tricks or just certain outfits that still look like your normal work clothes, but are secret cycling clothes. So absolutely happy to have a chat if she wants to find out some tricks, because I used to be full corporate, complete suit, pencil skirt, the whole works, and still managed to ride a bike. So there were tricks that we worked out. Right, I'm doing the last call for questions. So there's a few coming in. Wookie is agreeing that we don't spend enough time telling people how consistent cycling is, or people don't hear it. And how never having to find a parking space is so freeing. Although I think in Cambridge, we do know that it can be hard sometimes to find a parking space for your bike. But I absolutely agree. And I think you'd probably agree with this as well, Sarah. I mean, particularly in Australia, we sort of drive in these suburbs and so on, and or getting to the, you have to walk to the train to get on the train, or drive to the train or something. And then actually when you realize that all those little links you've had to add up together are much longer than just simply riding a bike. And you realize places are actually a lot closer than you thought.
Totally. Like I could never get, if I was to walk to my, like, I think one of the worst things about starting to cycle is like walking now seems incredibly inefficient. I used to be a massive walker, and now I'm like, oh, it's going to be like a half an hour round journey if I go and get a coffee from the local coffee shop, because it's 15 minutes there and then it's 15 minutes back and then I have to queue. But if I ride my bike, it's like downhill on the way there. So it's like 3 minutes. Like I can have a half an hour gap between meetings and like have a coffee and a millionaire shortbread by the time I'm sitting at my next meeting. This is what this is what a good thing looks like. And I think that, the fact that there's all of that incidental time that you spend waiting for the train, waiting for the bus, looking for a car space, stuck in traffic, all of that you lose out. One of the things I'd really love to see in terms of, how we talk to drivers and how we talk to motorists is thinking about time spent in the car versus time spent cycling. And so looking at for February, we're just starting out, measure the amount of time that you spend in the car, and then in March try and reduce that time, and then in April try and reduce that time again, and just keep trying to chip away at it, because I think as soon as you start giving people an incentive to leave that car at home, it becomes much less tempting to pick it up again. I used to be like, I love walking, I listen to podcasts, I do all of this, it's so soothing, and now I'm like, ugh, like it's so slow. And obviously I still do it because walking is really important, but I changed my mind, people change their minds, they just have to be given the opportunity to.
Yeah. And Jim's come back with a bit more advice for John as well, and saying why not get your daughter to do the 3 mile ride and see if she actually gets sweaty. And this is what you were saying, Sarah, I would say do it on the weekend, do it together. It's a lovely activity to do together. Maybe don't even tell her how far you're cycling, just go for a little ride, nice and slow, get there, you're not sweaty, there's a nice coffee at the other end, and wouldn't it be nice to do this every day? Oh, by the way, that was your 3 mile commute we've just done. So I think people just think 3 miles is a lot further than it is. We've got a little discussion going on in the chat here, which is about where would be the absolutely hardest place in Britain to start a cycling campaign. So someone's come forward and said a remote rural community. Someone is representing Retford cycling campaign and saying that they're possibly the worst. John is suggesting the Lake District. You're quite new to this, Sarah, so you probably don't know where all the cycling campaigns are around the UK, but do you have any contributions to that chat?
I mean, when I bought my bike, and you'll have seen it in the presentation, I very much like went to the bike shop and was like, I want a bike that is perfect for someone who is super wobbly and like very much not confident. So I got like an upright bike and all of those things, which was fantastic for like the first couple of weeks when I was super wobbly. And then when I started actually going places with people, I was just like, even the slightest of hills destroy me. Like my thighs are not built for this. So for me, the Lake District, sort of, you know, Scottish Highlands, anywhere with hills, and especially hills and ice, is like an absolute disaster. But you know, I am not a proud person, and I'm definitely not too proud to see a hill and go no, and just get off and walk my bike up that hill. You know, that's enough for me. It's the going down part that's exciting. And you know, immediately I was like, I have bought the wrong bike. I need one that lets me use my bum to get up a hill. But you know, with this one now.
You've just reminded me when I first started cycling on that rusty red bike, and I couldn't actually get up the hill to my house. So I would always just try, and I'd always have to bail out before I got to the top of the hill. But I still remember the day I made it up the hill for the first time. So it can be done. But yeah, it was just this always, and you get home, it's like, oh God, I've still got to get up the hill. And it wasn't that big a hill, I tell you. Okay, this might be our last question. So it's from Margaret. Ari Google, has Sarah answered the question on Twitter about having Google setting cycling as the default for journeys of 4 miles or less? And actually, I'll bring into that because I'd be interested to know about your LTN as well, with just routing people through the LTN. You know, how do we get Google and the various other sat-nav organizations to not, one, don't put people through neighborhoods, and two, update more quickly so that the LTNs are in there? But then also, is there any views on how they should make cycling the default option?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. The idea of the 4 miles under being a cycle journey. You know, I wonder whether or not there's legislative, and I say this as someone who has absolutely no legal background, just as a campaigner perspective, whether or not there's legislative avenue for making it so that these sort of ways, Google Maps, those sort of different organizations, like those sort of companies, can't route people through residential areas. And I know that there's isolated instances of communities winning those battles. There's this really famous one of the Hollywood sign. I don't know if people know, but where the Hollywood sign is marked, you can't actually get to the Hollywood sign. You look at it from a viewing point that's a different part of the city, but all of the Google Maps and the different apps set the Hollywood sign as this marker, which is the residential road that was very, very high up in the sort of mountains, that is the closest point that you can actually get to the Hollywood sign, which is still about 1 kilometer or something away. And this poor sort of street that had 3 houses on it and didn't have any curbs and like was too narrow to turn around in, was having thousands of people go there every day trying to get to the Hollywood sign. And they managed to force the companies to move where they were marking that as. But you know, I think that there is an argument for councils and local governments saying that, like, unless people are trying to access a specific street, they have to take A roads, or they have to take these sort of streets that were designed for them. And you know, there's that whole argument of, you know, main roads have people living on them as well, and they totally do, and those people don't deserve congestion or pollution or any of those things. But the fact of the matter is that those roads were designed to move traffic. You know, they have crossings, they have traffic lights, they're wide enough, they have these lines of visions, whereas residential roads were never designed to move as many cars as they are now, and they're, you know, more people die on them. It's just a matter of those sort of facts. So I think that getting those companies on board is a real part of it. And I think, you know, potentially there's some that would be open to it, you know, like Waze, one of the Waze directors has come out and said that, like, we destroyed the city. Like, they're very aware of that fact. So, you know, I think it's potentially something that we could look at it. Maybe there's an angle even there with Uber, right? Like, if they're going to have a license to operate in a city, then they need to be making sure that they're not congesting residential roads and roads that weren't designed to take on that traffic. It's one of the things that I love about this space is, like, when I think about the work that I do on Yemen, there's so many things have been tried, right? And you just spend your time trying to come up with ideas as to how you can do this stuff. In active travel, I think that right at this point in history, we have so many options and so many potential avenues for campaigning. I did a brainstorm with just a group of people off the internet the other day, and we developed over 100 ideas in 40 minutes of things that we could approach. It's more of a capacity and time issue, which is a campaigner is such a delight, because it's just like, you know, I've got my whole life to devote to this. I've got time, you know, I'll just start ticking these things off one by one. But yeah, I would be really interested in seeing, you know, what a legal mind does with targeting those corporations, because there's real potential there.
Yep. Brilliant. Right. Well, I will start wrapping this up. Firstly, with a promise from John that he will take his daughter Jessie on that 3-mile trip to work one weekend, and we'll report back. So maybe we'll have a new cyclist that we can hear from. So do let us know how it goes, John. But apart from that, I must say a huge thank you, Sarah, for a very inspiring talk. And I think especially the answers to those questions, really fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you can join us in person soon, and we'll give you a tour of Cambridge and show you what a real cycling city is like.
Yes, please. Thank you for having me. It's a real privilege. I'm really impressed by the work you guys do. So thank you so much for having me.
We're impressed by you too. I'm getting lots of virtual claps here. So thank you so much. Now you can stick around. We've got a couple of updates to go, and then we're off to the virtual pub. But if you need to get on with your evening, that's okay too. You can pop out. But for now, just say thank you again. And I will take over the screen. Bear with me, everybody. So here we have some campaigning updates from Camcycle, and it's very brief, but I would say make sure that you get onto our website and visit our blog, because there's lots more information online. In particular, some really great updates, as I guess what we're calling more spaces to breathe. So we have the very exciting news that there has been a rearrangement of the Silver Street and Trumpington Street junction. So before, when it felt like you should be going straight and that you had right of way, actually the right of way was turning to the left or the right if you're going from the other direction. So now that really common cycling route that is just going straight down Trumpington Street now has right of way at that junction. So really great to see that there at last. So excellent. We also have the new modal filter on Panton Street in the Newtown area of Cambridge. Now, I must admit, I haven't actually got there to look at this one yet, but I'm sure we'll have a few people in the comments who might have some opinions about it. But that's creating, I guess, another low traffic street and possibly a low traffic neighbourhood there in the Newtown area. And we're getting some great feedback about that, which is brilliant. We also have long awaited the double yellow lines on Red Cross Lane. And so you can see in the distance of that third picture, the filter on Nightingale Avenue. So this has now created a really fantastic, quiet cycle route down Nightingale Avenue onto Red Cross Lane, and then through the cut through to Adam Brooks. So this will be fantastic for people who are working or needing to visit the hospital to have another safe cycle route going that way. And well done to the residents of Red Cross Lane who have worked so hard for this. And I know that Matthew Danish has been involved and Sam Davies. So well done to everybody involved campaigning for those double yellow lines. We have campaigning updates. So I'm hoping, bear with me, we're trying a new Zoom feature here. And what I'm hoping I can do is actually bring in a Camcycle trustee who can talk about that. Put them on the spot. And let's see if this new feature works while we wait for that to go through. Oh, here we go. Matthew Danish, would you like to pop in and tell us anything about Netherhall Farm?
Hi. Yes, my video doesn't work apparently. It says the host has stopped it, but I can talk if you can hear me.
Yes, and while you talk, I will fix that video issue for you.
Yeah, so basically there's planning committee tomorrow for this development, which is I think 200 home development on Warts Causeway. And it's kind of a bit of a surprise it came forward this soon, but there's a bunch of issues. Some of them have been resolved, some of them have not. The main one we're going to talk about is that it has no connection to Queen Edith's community, basically. So that you have Wolfston Way Shops to the north, you have the Queen Edith Primary School there, the Netherhall School to the northeast, and the only way in and out of the site is to go all the way south to Warts Causeway. And then the only thing you can do at that point is to come, well, the shortest thing you can do to that point is to come north through Fieldway and use this tiny little cut through that goes between Almoners Avenue and Fieldway. And it's in really bad shape and really narrow. And it's still, even to get to that point, you have to go a very long way around. So the point is that this is kind of a ridiculous situation. There's very short connection to Almoners Avenue. It's almost on the other side of the fence right there. And Netherhall School is not so far, but let's see if that works. Hi, yes. So so in either case, a quicker connection could be established. There's multiple ways this could happen. It could be, they could use what was supposed to be a reserved space at the end of the turnaround there at the dead end at Almoners Avenue, or there's also a slot on Beaumont Road, which is empty, doesn't have a house in it. I think it's currently might back onto school land, but that should be something they could work out. Either way, or any other solution the applicants would offer, but they haven't done anything. They basically said it's too hard, so we're not going to bother, and we're just going to force everyone to go through this really, really long, basically an additional 1,000 meters every time they want to go to the shops, each direction, like approximately. I think at least 600 meters in like the best case. So every time they go to the shops or to schools or anything like that. And as we all know, that's just, adding more and more burden to people walking and cycling, and they're probably not going to take it. And people moving here are just going to say, screw it, let's get in a car and drive because it's easier. And it's just completely wrong to build things like this. Both Cambridge local policy says that you're supposed to establish connections to nearby neighborhoods, and the local transport note 1/20 says that you should have a walking and cycling grid of, let's say, 250 meters to 400 meter granularity in a built up area. And this would be over 1,000 meters of no connection. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow, along with some other objectors. I don't want to keep going on and on, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, Matt, I have a question. What can people do about this? Should they write to their councillor, wait until after this meeting tomorrow?
If you want to write to your councillor, if you want to write to the planning committee council members, you go to our blog post, and there's a link to it. You got to do it tonight, because tomorrow morning, by the time the meeting happens, it'll be too late. So I would suggest that if you are interested, and go ahead and read our blog post to get more details, and also the link to the planning committee members is there. You can see more in the bolded text.
Yeah, excellent. So there's more information about this on the Camcycle blog, so do take a look. Thank you, Matt. I'll keep you here because there might be more, or we might have some questions come through. Excellent. So another one, yes, this will be a good one for you too, Matt. We're advising our members to take action and to get behind us in asking the county to, well, they've already turned one bus lane into a Tesla lane, but let's make sure that they take it out and don't do any more. So this is about Elizabeth Way, where a bus lane that is not actually used by buses has been turned into a electric vehicle lane, as well as a bus lane and a cycle lane. And this has been done using an ETRO, or an experimental traffic order, to see what happens. But we're concerned for a number of reasons. Firstly, just how can you do this experiment in a bus lane if there are no buses using it? So it's worrying what conclusions they will draw simply from that, but also the danger that happens when you're mixing big, fast and very quiet vehicles with people who are cycling. In addition to that, this is a policy that's really out of date. Electric vehicles don't need that much more encouraging. That's what's happening. They're coming online. We will have too many electric vehicles to use this lane in the future. So it's not going to be encouraging more people to buy electric vehicles because they're doing it already. It's just going to be contributing more to congestion. But Matt, you've written an excellent blog post about this, so perhaps you could add any other points that you might have.
Yeah, thanks for that, Roxanne. Just a quick thing about the previous item. Wookie has pointed out that a short message is just fine. You don't have to write a whole lot because they won't have time to read it anyway. Okay, so yeah, and speaking of this particular topic, this is going through the ETRO process, which has been used as part of the active travel program as well to create some modal filters. But so there is more time to respond to this. The consultation is ongoing for quite some time, so you don't have to rush to do this particular one. But do follow the blog post and write to policy and regulation at cambridgeshire.gov.uk. More details are on the blog post, and make sure you cite the number of the TRO, which is PR0 or PR0667, something like that. So again, it's all on the blog post. Again, it's just completely perverse that they've done this during a time when they were supposed to be creating temporary or experimental active travel infrastructure, even on Elizabeth Way Bridge, mind you. They've instead taken one of the few spaces which doesn't have cars and turned it into a space with cars. And of course, you know, while this road is never congested in this direction, at least, if they take this idea and put it, you know, on Milton Road or on Newmarket Road or on Hills Road, then basically it's taken away what little space there is. You know, bus lanes are not good space, but they are something. And then that's just taken away because electric cars are getting to be much more common these days, and that's just wrong. We really need changes to go so that people are protected, not so that people are losing protection effectively.
Yeah. And if we see it in Norway, they had policies like this when electric vehicles were new, but now there are so many electric vehicles, they're having to reverse these policies. And I think it would be a lot harder to reverse these things once they're in. So let's look to what others are doing and learn from them. Excellent. Lesser campaigning issue, but something maybe a task to do during lockdown, but we're asking people if they've got a big picture, a lovely positive picture of people cycling or a piece of cycling infrastructure that you would like to see featured in our magazine. So do get in touch if you've got a photo that you think would work for that big double page spread in the Camcycle magazine. Here's one example from an earlier edition. And the last one had an excellent picture by Bill Blake of the Chisholm Trail Bridge. So do get in touch if you've got a great picture, or maybe feel motivated to see if you can get a lovely winter shot or a spring shot. Spring's coming. Another quick one, if you may have heard already or may not, that the Hope Street Yard tenants have all been asked to leave by mid-February, and that means that our school run centre, the first seller and wholesaler of cargo bikes in the UK, I believe, hasn't got a home. So if anybody has any ideas of where the school run centre could relocate, please do get in touch with us. We'll put you in touch with Hugh, that he's looking for, I believe, about 70 metres square and in a location where it will be easy and safe for people to go out and try cargo bikes for the first time. So they need a bit of space where it's okay to have a bit of a wobble. So yes, at least 70 metres square, somewhere safe, somewhere fairly central, and easy for people to get to. So do get in touch if you've got any ideas. But we want to see our cycling businesses succeed, and we need our cargo bike shops. Okay, and another quick update, you can jump online and read some of our new cycling policies. So we've had 2 more published since we've last had a meeting together. You can see those at camcycle.org.uk/policy. One of the new ones is the maintenance of cycleways and facilities. So that is very timely, considering we need to make sure our cycleways are safe from snow and ice. We also have our policies about cycling to work, and we're now working on inclusive cycling and cycling in green spaces. So have a look at what we've published, and if you'd like to get involved, we're certainly looking for help to keep that project going. And it's very sad news, but our fantastic intern Beth is finishing with us at the end of this week, and she's done an incredible job on this policy project. So a huge thank you to Beth. We're going to miss her a lot. Wish her the best for the future, and maybe one day she'll come back and do some more work for us as well. Excellent. So thank you to Beth for the work she's done on our policies. Oh, we've seen this already, but I guess a reminder doesn't hurt. Jump online and check out our latest annual review. But before I wrap things up, I will bring Matt back in. I know he has another update, and if anyone's got any general questions, pop them through. We'll do our best to answer them if we know them. Before you come in, Matt, I'll just mention that, yes, there will be the Camcycle pub after this as well. But Matt, you had an update. I'll let you provide that.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, thanks. I didn't arrange for a photo, but so some of you may know that the county suddenly dropped in some new barriers and chicanes on the new A14 bridges that were just built by Highways England last year. Very suddenly, these seem to have appeared in the past week or two. So just we are starting to ramp up the campaign about this. We can't have, these barriers are obviously, talking about inclusive cycling, these barriers are the opposite. They basically make it impossible for people on tandems or with many types of adapted cycles, possibly cargo cycles, to get through. And it's really just completely the wrong way. It's actually, the county's going from, they're supposed to be encouraging cycling and enabling cycling, and now they're actually taking it away. A brand new pathway, brand new bridges that were built just last year. So, and of course, it's completely in contravention with the local transport note 1/20. So unfortunately, there's some very backwards, regressive people at the county council who still believe in making cyclists suffer. And so we need to work up a campaign against this destruction of the active travel routes. But we are going to get something together. And if you want to get involved, please join the Cyclescape thread or email at contact, especially if you live in Bar Hill, Swavesey area. I know people there want to get involved. It definitely could use some local assistance as well on this one. So well, as you know, there's a thread, I forgot the number, but you can also just email us at contact@camcycle.org.uk. Thanks a lot.
John has offered an angle grinder to remove those barriers, but we keep our activities all within, all legal. But I'm wondering, can we beat our record? How quickly did we remove the barriers at the biomedical campus?
Another year.
Yeah. Well, was that less than a month? So come on, we love a good barrier campaign to kick off the year. Bring it on. That I think that actually got everybody really motivated to campaign quite early in the year. So maybe this is our next barrier campaign. I mean, why they keep bringing them, I don't know, but we'll keep pulling them down.
We want to make sure that they understand that the local transport note 1/20 is the new rule, and they need to not do these things in the first place. Really, it's a real safety hazard. It's putting people in danger, and it's blocking access to people with disabilities. So it's just wrong altogether.
Yeah, and we've had a picture of the barriers and more information posted on the Facebook chat as well. Right, I think we're about ready to wrap things up, but I am just going to really quickly bring this screen up again because it's the start of the year, so good to remind people of just how they can get involved in Camcycle in 2021. So if you're not a member already, please do join us as a member. That's the best way to find out what's going on. But also your support makes us stronger, and we're a fantastic community. So do think of becoming a member. Perhaps you could talk to your organization about whether they could become a corporate supporter of Camcycle. It works really well. It helps us generate the resources we need to do the work, but we can provide a lot of support to workplaces, resources for their staff, help with events and so on. So perhaps have a chat to someone in the HR or the marketing or the transport team about whether your organization could support Camcycle. Doesn't really work at the moment, but sponsoring or hosting an event, maybe it'd be nice to have a sponsor for a monthly meeting, or we could do some other bonus online meeting, but something to keep in mind for the future. Worth mentioning, advertising in our magazine. We'd love to see a few more ads in there. So if you're a local business or you've got any ideas of businesses that we could approach, do let us know, because advertising helps us keep that magazine going. Of course, you can always donate to Camcycle. We love a donation. It helps us keep things going, keep the lights on in our houses. Not really, we don't have an office at the moment, but when we have our office, it does help keep the lights on. And of course, volunteering. So for the magazine, writing an article, lots of issues that people have asked great questions about. Maybe they could explore that and turn that into a bit of an article for the magazine. It doesn't need to be something long. It doesn't all need to be detailed infrastructure, lots of potential. So do get in touch if you'd like to do that. We're hoping to increase the amount of leaflet deliveries that we do this year. So if you'd like to be the coordinator for your local area so that we can get leaflets out to all the houses in your area, please do get in touch, because we want to beat our record of 20,000 leaflets this year. And I think we can do that if we have a few more volunteers to help coordinate. We've mentioned already a few ways you could write a letter or write an email to get behind a cause. And particularly if you're a member, you'll get our weekly emails, which will let you know when and where letters need to be written. I mentioned our policy project already, and while we have elected our trustees, if that's something that sounds interesting, it's a great time to get in touch and have a chat, and something that you might like to take on later this year or next year. It can be a learning curve, and we can start training you up now if it's something that you're interested in. And while I'm talking about that, I'd just like to add that doing these monthly meetings, it's a lot of Roxanne, and I guess that's because we had to very quickly move to monthly meetings and very quickly get these things up and running. But it looks like we'll be doing this for quite a while. So I really want to open this space and see if there's someone else who'd like to have a turn at hosting a monthly meeting or helping maybe just facilitate one part of it. We brought Matt in today. Maybe someone would like to go and prepare the campaigning update and deliver that part of the monthly meeting, because this is for members and it should be by members, and it's just become quite difficult to do that when it's all run out of my little office here. But if there's someone out there who'd like to have a go at this, I won't throw you in the deep end. We'll train you up. We'll be here to support you. But if you'd like to have a go at chairing the meeting or facilitating part of it, preparing some content, please get in touch. It's not too bad once you get going. And I'm sure people would like to see a few different faces rather than just mine. So get in touch if that sounds of interest. But apart from that, I'll just say thank you everybody for joining us this evening for our first monthly meeting of the year. We'll be doing these for a while, so if you've got any feedback or thoughts about monthly meetings, do feel free to send them. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all staying relatively happy and healthy in all these strange times. And if you'd like to have a chat, come and join us at the pub. But thanks everyone, and have a good night. Bye.